but I've had no request for people to speak in Welsh today, so we will conduct the meeting in English only. Please can I remind members to refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon when you want to speak. May I also remind you that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011, our meetings formally adopted a hybrid meeting policy, and any member attending the meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public who are viewing the meeting. So can I please ask you all to please use your cameras for the duration of this meeting. Can I also remind you to keep your microphones muted when you are not speaking, and also do not interrupt discussions until you have notified of your intention to speak and you've been invited to do so. We now move on to our agenda. Jade, do we have any apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest this morning? None. Okay, we move on to item agenda 3, the minutes of the meeting of the 18th of January. Can I remind members that these are minutes of the meeting where we scrutinise the proposed new model for the front door to adult social services care. Could you please state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If you're happy, then I'll take them as read. Move on to action 4. Rebecca, can you run through our action sheet, please?
Thank you, Chair. So there were 2 actions listed on the action sheet, one with regards to the recommendations, which you've all received the responses to now, and then a second one about some further information you'd asked for at the last meeting, which you've also received now. So nothing further to add, Chair.
Right, thank you, Bex. We'll now move on to our report for this morning. But before we do so, I'd like to welcome Jason O'Brien, the Head Strategic Director for Children's, Family and Education, Jacqueline Richards, Interim Head of Children's and Family Services, and also to Claire Warlock, Group Manager of Children and Family Services. Jason, hand over to you to give us a brief summary of the report.
And I'm going to hand straight over to Jacqueline Richards, who's going to take us through it. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Jacqueline, go on.
Good morning, members. Thank you. So the report today sets out Torfaen's response to the National Rapid Review of Child Protection. Members will be aware that the Rapid Review was published in September of last year. It was commissioned by Welsh Government in response to a number of child deaths across both England and Wales. The Rapid Review of Child Protection was led by Care Inspectorate Wales alongside colleagues from Health Inspectorate Wales and Essyn. And the report sets out a number of recommendations for children's services, for multi-agencies, the regional safeguarding boards, health. The report that I've prepared today sets out our response to the recommendations that are specific for children's services and also the multi-agency responses, because obviously they're the ones that we have more control over. So I won't go through all of the recommendations because they're set out clearly within the report. So just to provide some local context. So in terms of the latest information, data available via Stats Wales, there were 2,932 children on the Child Protection Register in Wales as at 31st of March 2022. And Torfaen had a rate of 48 children per 10,000 of the population under 18 on the Child Protection Register. The figures, the numbers of children on the Child Protection Register as at the end of December 2023 were 109, with the highest proportion of those children registered under the category of neglect. The report then sets out our reflections in relation to the recommendations and where we feel we are, and also the actions that we intend to take in response to those recommendations. So you'll see those at 7.1 of the report. So we intend to review and revise our business processes to ensure that outcomes are communicated to referrers in a timely manner, regardless of which team is receiving and responding to the duty to report. So you'll see within the body of report that I've commented that within the multi-agency support and safeguarding team, which is essentially our front door, we have robust business processes in place to ensure that responses are provided to referrers in a timely manner, but those same business processes are not replicated across all of the teams in children's services, so that is something that we need to consider. We will also review the quality assurance framework that we have in place and the associated documentation to ensure that the recommendations from the rapid review are considered within all case file audits, and endeavour to increase our capacity to provide services in the Welsh language. We do have social workers within the department who speak Welsh, but those social workers don't sit within the multi-agency support and safeguarding hub. We will review and revise our business processes to ensure that GPs receive the summary and outline plan following conference, regardless of whether or not they are in attendance. So at the moment, we're confident that GPs are always invited to attend child protection conferences, but we're only sending the outline plan to those who are actually in attendance. So that's something that we need to ensure happens in response to the recommendations of the review. We will adopt and promote the regional threshold guidance once it has been ratified by the Gwent Safeguarding Board, and that is due to be considered by the Gwent Safeguarding Board next week. And I actually led and chaired the task and finish group meetings that developed that regional threshold guidance, which was very much based on the threshold guidance that we already have in place in Torfaen that has been widely consulted on across the region. We will work closely with our colleagues in NIAS to improve engagement via the active offer. So you'll see within the report that all children and young people over the age of 5 who are coming before child protection conferences have the active offer. The take-up of that active offer is actually very low. That's not an issue that's specific to Torfaen. It is an issue that was raised within the national review, but it is something that we know that we really need to work on. We will also work closely with the newly appointed Children and Young People's Participation Officer in Torfaen to improve children's participation in child protection conferences. I've already mentioned in respect of NIAS and the advocacy offer, but children and young people, where appropriate and where they're at an appropriate age to attend conference, should have the opportunity to attend and participate in conferences themselves. Even if they're not attending for the whole conference, they should have the opportunity to attend part of that conference so that they remain central to that process. Again, I don't think that's an issue specific to Torfaen. It's a real challenge, but something that we're really keen to improve and work on. We'll also review our use of family group conferences and meetings within child protection processes. I think we're confident, well, we are confident that we involve members of the household fully within our assessment. What I think we could really improve on is having a better understanding and assessment of wider family members that are significant in a child's life at a much earlier stage, not least because they could form a significant part of the support network around that child and actually improving things to the point that the child could no longer be at risk of significant harm. And I think that's really important, but also because there could be risks associated with those individuals that are relevant to the child protection planning processes. And we will also develop a reporting framework to ensure that key themes, learning and good practice identified within case file audits are shared across the service. So at the moment we have a robust process in place for quality assuring case file audits, and that is done on a routine basis shared across the management team, and child protection cases will always form a significant part of those case file audits. What I think we could really improve upon is pulling together some of the themes from those case file audits, both in terms of good practice and areas of development moving forward. and we have got a service development manager who came into post last summer. And I think it could be a key role of hers to develop going forward in terms of pulling together those themes from the audits and reporting back to the management team on a quarterly basis or biannual basis. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to come. Did Jason or Claire want to come in or anything? Are you happy if we start our questioning? I've got question 1. How did CIW work with local authorities throughout this review?
So all 22 local authorities were asked to complete a number of surveys. So that included a self-evaluation. We were asked to provide data as part of that, answer a number of questions. I think the collated responses to those surveys are included as appendices within the full report. Obviously, they haven't identified specific local authorities within that. And there were also surveys that went out to children, young people, parents, carers, practitioners, etc. were asked to contribute to that. And it also included local authorities being asked to submit obviously redacted child protection conference minutes as well, so that they could consider those as part of the process.
Worth adding, I think, Chair, as well, is that we have a key CIW link within the local authority who meets with the head of children's services twice a year, at least twice a year. That individual also meets with me as the director with statutory responsibilities for social services once a year, and over the last 12 months, the findings, the CIW findings from this inspection have been discussed therein, and they've also presented some high-level findings as well to the leadership team and to Cabinet within the last couple of months as part of their annual discussions with Audit Wales and with Eston as part of that regulatory collective.
Anybody else want to come in on that one? We move on to question 2, which comes from Councillor Rose Seaborn. Okay, Rose?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. My question relates to 3.4 in the report. The review identified many areas of excellent practice, in addition to making recommendations for further focus. How will the excellent practice identified be shared?
Thank you. The recommendations of the report have been shared across the service widely. One of the things I mentioned was the service development manager role within Torvine, and she is playing a key part in trying to bring, we know that social workers are very busy, and the day job is quite significant, but what we also need to do is ensure that any learning that comes through from national reviews such as this, research, etc., is really brought into practice. And that is a key role of the service development manager, and one of the things that she has recently introduced is bite-sized learning sessions for social workers, but also for practitioners across children's services, and we've also extended that out to colleagues in education as well. So, but short sessions that are manageable, that mean that we're able to get high levels of attendance, but to share some of that learning from both this report, but also others and research. And I think it's fair to say that we're involved a lot more now than we have been previously in various research projects as well, which I think is really helpful, because I don't think with child protection it's never going to be an area that we could say we've got this nailed, we're doing it perfectly. There will always be learning for us, things will always move forward, there will always be increasing complexities, messages from practice, messages from child practice reviews, research, etc. And we need to ensure that those messages are getting to the practitioners who are actually working with the children and families.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just have a supplementary? it was explained how we share within our local authority. How do we share with our other partners and outside our local authority? Good practice.
We are, as Interim Head of Children's Services, I'm a member of the Regional Safeguarding Board. There are a number of groups that sit underneath the Regional Safeguarding Board. There is a range of multi-agency training that's delivered and facilitated by the Safeguarding Board practitioner, learning events that are held regularly with very high levels of attendance. So I think we're confident that those messages are extended beyond the local authority to other partner agencies.
Okay, Rose, I'm going to invite Claire to come in a minute, please.
Jacqueline's covered much of what I intended to say, but I think from a wider perspective, attendance at regional safeguarding boards and the relationships that we have with the other local authority safeguarding leads, we're learning from one another. So where there are examples of good practice, perhaps in one local authority, we're ensuring that that's shared amongst the whole region to be sure that, you know, whilst we do things differently, we can learn from each other and make improvements where.
Okay, Rose?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, we move on to question 3 from Councillor Lucy Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Jacqueline, for putting the report into context. That was really helpful to kind of give a bit of a narrative behind it. So, looking at 3.6, there's a big raft of multi-agency recommendations. So, just trying to understand a little bit more who would take responsibility for ensuring that these are all actioned?
All agencies, but the Regional Safeguarding Board are working to pull together an action plan in response to the recommendations, and that includes the specific recommendations for the Regional Safeguarding Board, but will also consider those that are relevant to multi-agency.
Thank you.
Okay, Lucy?
Yeah.
Councillor Clarkson, do you want to come with your question, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Going on to 3.7, Children's Services recommendations. We note that the review was an all-Wales review, so the question is, to what extent are these recommendations already carried out within Torfaen, and where are the activities and measures that we need to action?
Thank you. So I think hopefully the report sets out the response to that. So within the report I've set out each key line of inquiry and then the recommendations that are relevant to children's services and multi-agency and the areas where we think we could improve, which then leads on to the actions that we will take following scrutiny, obviously taking into consideration any recommendations that members have for us following today's meeting, that we will take those forward as a local authority.
Just as a supplementary, is there a lot of work to do, or are we already largely compliant?
I think we're confident that we are largely compliant. And like I say, the actions that are set out in 7.1 highlight the areas where we feel that we could improve. But I think just to reiterate the comment that I made in relation to, this is never an area where we can stand still. So once we've completed and considered the areas that we know we need to improve on, there will always be more. In response to recommendations from child practice reviews, research, information that's shared across the region as well.
Thank you. That's great.
I was just going to add in, again, as Jacqueline said, in terms of those recommendations, I think that there'll be areas where we will be achieving them at different levels throughout. And just one of the examples I was going to draw upon was the practice framework, where we've spent an awful lot of time. And I think we brought the scrutiny previously, where we spent an awful lot of time developing a strength-based practice model, practice framework within children's social care. Even though that's developed and well embedded, of course we'll have new staff joining the service, so it's a constant rolling programme. So I think the crucial bit, I think, within every recommendation within this report is there's never a standstill time. There's always constant move on, constant development, and every recommendation, we would never be at a point where we would go, you know, we've got that 100% sorted. There's always going to be, you know, because of the nature of the, I guess, the nature of our roles, there's always going to be need for that constant move on.
Thank you, Jason. Linda, you're happy with that? David, do you want to come in on the next question?
Yeah, I think you've largely answered this, Jacqueline, but because I was going to ask, you know, how cognizant we had to be of the recommendations to other agencies, such as the National Independent Safeguarding Board, Welsh Government, Health, Education, etc. And you've responded to say that, you know, it's down to all the agencies and the safeguarding boards to do some coordination of that. I guess it's the sort of, are we expecting that Welsh Government will be looking to see that theirs and the national recommendations are taken forward? I'm trying to understand how that's going to fit, really. Understandably, our focus has to be on what relates to us in children's services and multi-agency. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess in terms of that link with Welsh Government and CIW recommendations, obviously there's an expectation through that continued monitoring process as we have with CIW, that as a local authority and as children's services, we will be, you know, developing and adhering to those recommendations. But again, there'll also be that continued catch-up, both on a regional element with our respective colleagues' links with CIW and our own as to how you impacting upon agencies within this as well. And one of the things that I know Jacqueline mentioned around the safeguarding board and the impact that we have there within the safeguarding board around that multi-agency approach and ensuring that there's those recommendations are followed through other agencies. But of course, what we also have as well are our local relationships and our own individual partnership relationships with, you know, the police, with health, with education, for example. So even though we've got that regional challenge, we've also got that local challenge and, you know, the ability to pick up the phone, really, in many ways. If there's any aspect of this that relates to an individual case, we think, I want to admit that's not being followed through, you know, there's that ability to do that as well.
That's very helpful.
Okay. We can now move on to information and discussion. And Steve Evans has the next question.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's on paragraph 4.1. How do we work with authorities who have a much lower number of children on the child protection per 100,000 rate to learn best practice to understand the reasons why our figures are higher?
I think we may have partly already answered this question in relation to regional links, but we also have positive national links. So as the Interim Head of Children and Family Services, I will regularly meet with heads of services across the 22 local authorities, and positive practice is shared. I think it's probably fair to say that we are better. It's inevitable in some respects at sharing practice across the region, but there are also links nationally as well. And the safeguarding boards, the regional safeguarding boards, share practice as well with other regional safeguarding boards.
Jason, you want to come in?
In terms of, I guess, what you're referencing there, Councillor, is the graph in 4.1. And what I'd say with regards to our child protection figures, child protection registration figures, they're quite different to our children looked after figures in that they're quite volatile and can pretty much turn on sixpence. So that will be at a particular point in time. And I anticipate that there'll be other points throughout the year where you could have looked and we will have fallen further down or further up that chart. And for example, I know that, and this is a figure off the top of my head, but I know that we've in the last 12 months, I think we were at a low of about 65 children on the child protection register, whereas, you know, we're over 100 at the moment. So there is that great level of volatility really within those figures.
Sorry, Chair, could I just come in there briefly? So just to reiterate the point that Jason has just made, in the summer, last summer, July last year, our child protection figures were 67, and they're now 124. So it's just to reiterate really the volatility of those figures. And within the last week, there have been 10 children added to the register and 5 children removed from the register.
okay, Steve, or do you have anything else to come in on? Next question is from Councillor Rose Seaborn.
My question's just been answered, Chair, so thank you for that.
To move on to Councillor Clarkson for question 8, please, Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm looking 4.5 of the report that was looking at the rate at which initial child protection conferences are held in Torfaen and the rate at which review conferences are held. And the question is, there's a disparity, and there seems to be an issue with the initial conferences, and some of what you've already answered, the volatility of the register. Just looking for some context, really, into why there seems to be a lag in the initial conferences being held within the timescales, and whether or not there can be any improvement or any barriers that we need to be aware of within both of those figures.
Yeah. Certainly, just to put that into context, so when a concern is reported to the local authority and we feel in response to that concern that we have reasonable cause to suspect that a child is at risk of significant harm, it's at that point that we will hold a strategy discussion, multi-agency strategy discussion, social services, police, health, any education, any other relevant organisations. And if at the point of that strategy discussion we're determining that there is a need for child protection inquiries, it's at that point that the clock starts ticking in terms of the 15 working days from that point to actually be at conference. Now, whilst we absolutely understand the need for those timescales to be tight, they are very tight timescales to undertake child protection inquiries, form an assessment, write a report, gather information from all other agencies, ensure that the children, young people, family members are very much part of that process, share the report with family members, share the report with the conference chair, and actually get to the meeting. So just to put that kind of timescale into context, really, and it's that really fine balance that we're constantly working with around ensuring that we are being proactive in getting these matters before a child protection conference at the earliest opportunity, whilst also ensuring that we do have the information required for that multi-agency partnership to actually make a decision as to whether the threshold is met for child protection registration. So whilst not wanting to appear defensive in any way in relation to that figure being quite low for the 66% within timescale, I think that provides a bit of a context behind that. The timescales are really tight. Obviously, with the review conferences then, at the initial conference, the date for the review conference will be set, so we have much more time to prepare for the review conference. So there will be review conferences that don't take place within timescales, and there will be all sorts of reasons for that. It may well be that a parent can't attend, they've got a last-minute hospital appointment, or there will be various reasons. But in terms of the 66% that are held within timescales, if we're not going to meet that 15 working day timescale, there has to be authorisation from a group manager, so we will know why there has been a delay, and that could be for all sorts of reasons. Again, it's really important that the social worker who has completed that child protection investigation is actually in attendance at the conference, because they will be the best placed person to be there. So if for any reason they can't be there, it may well be that some of these timescales are 1 or 2 days outside of the 15 working day timescale. Some of them will be far more significant than that, and that may well be due to complexity of investigation. So, for example, we have single agency investigation, which we lead on as Children's Services, but we will also have joint investigations with the police, where the police are investigating a criminal element alongside our safeguarding inquiries. And that's when things can become a little bit more complex in terms of kind of organising diaries just on a practical level, really, to ensure that those investigations are undertaken in a timely manner. So I hope that answers your question, but it's a very fine balance.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. That was much needed context. Obviously, this is the issue with targets and blunt data being put forward. The context perfectly explains the complexity of the situation and the necessity for all of the correct information to be presented at that conference. So thank you very much for that context.
Do Jason or Claire want to come in before we move on?
Can I just come in with one more point? Sorry, it's just to say that there is some dispute, I think it's fair to say, over the interpretation of the timescales, the 15 working day timescale. So I'm confident within Torfaen that we are reporting in line with our interpretation, which is 15 working days from the strategy discussion that determined the need for a child protection investigation. What we do know is that there are some local authorities that determine the 15 working day timescale from a strategy discussion. So what you could do, for example, is hold a further strategy discussion once you've completed your child protection investigation and count the 15 working days from there.
Claire, do you want to go in?
As Jacqueline said, that happens in some of the local authorities within the region. I would say that our process, having worked in Monmouthshire and Blaenau Gwent, I would say that our process is more effective. The purpose of that meeting is to pull all professionals together to ensure that you have full information on which to make a decision. So the sooner the better, in my view. So I think that Torfaen, whilst our figures, they won't reflect our neighbouring local authorities' figures because they're using their timescales from a different point. So they're not working within such tight timescales. I would say that ours are more effective in ensuring we've got that multi-agency, that collaborative approach to safeguarding.
Okay, Jason. Okay, well, you've answered my question as well. So it's question 9. So question 10 comes again from Councillor Clarkson. Do you want to come in with question 10, please?
Yeah, just got a sticky button on my mic. Apologies, Chair. Yeah, looking again at sort of operational stuff, 4.6 of the report. The Wales safeguarding procedure requires that children on the Child Protection Register are seen at loan at least every 10 working days. Are we hitting this target? And how can we improve on the 96% figure for home visits every 4 weeks, if possible?
Thank you. So the figure of 96%, sorry, is in relation to the statutory visits taking place. It's not specific to the visit taking place at home every 4 weeks, if that makes sense. So the 96% is the overall figure. I think it's important to say that that is completed statutory visits. So it doesn't mean to say that the social worker hasn't attempted to complete that statutory visit. So again, some of the examples may well be an older child on the child protection register who doesn't want to engage, where it may well be more difficult to actually ensure that we see them. It doesn't mean to say that the effort hasn't been made to see them. And obviously, where we're not managing to see the child every 10 working days, there would be an expectation that the multi-agency professionals are brought together to have a discussion and agree the most appropriate action. And it could be, for example, that we haven't managed to see that child as the statutory visit, but the school teacher can confirm that the child was in school yesterday, they were seen, they were well, they were spoken to, etc. So whilst we would always want that figure to be 100%, I think there are, a number of practicalities around that that would mean that perhaps we won't always hit that.
I think it's important to consider as well that a lot of our child protection visits need to be unannounced visits. To ensure that we're seeing the real experience of the child. And so I know personally that social workers can go out 2-3 times before they catch this family at home. and doing that within a 10-day time frame can be quite tricky. If we were planning them, I think we'd probably be hitting nearer to the 100%, but that's not effective in ensuring that we're safeguarding children well. Jason, do you want to come in?
Nothing to add, Chair, now.
Okay.
Again, thank you very much for that much needed explanatory context.
Lucy, you've got question 11.
Well, thank you very much. This is just trying to understand a little bit more. This is referring to 4.8, where you describe the outsourcing of the independent reviewing officer and child protection chair. So just to try and understand, and it says obviously there's quarterly contract monitoring. Just to understand, are you satisfied with that outsourcing? Is the monitoring and everything, does that work well? Are there any areas for concern, or are you, happy that all that outsourcing process works really well?
I'm confident that it's a robust process. We, I think, was it last year we went back through the tender process again?
Right.
And have the same provider. We have a positive, open relationship with the provider. We meet with them outside of those contract review meetings. I had a meeting with both directors of Checker Safeguarding only last week, where there were some concerns in relation to a case. I think we've got a really healthy relationship where we're able to offer that challenge both to them as a provider, but them back to us as well, and I think that's really important. I think what it also means is that we can be certain of that, or more certain then, you can never be 100% certain of that independence, but we can be more confident of the independence because we're outsourcing it. There is a requirement for the conference to be chaired by somebody who's independent of kind of the case management responsibilities and line management responsibilities for the social worker. So I think it really assists with that. And I think I'm right in saying that we have one reviewing officer who chairs the vast majority, if not all, child protection conferences, which is really helpful in terms of consistency, understanding some of those themes, etc. And she's a very, very experienced social worker, so I think that's really positive.
That's good.
Thank you very much.
Claire, do you want to come in? I think one of the other advantages is that Checker provides services to a number of different local authorities. So we then get the benefit of learning again from practice of other local authorities and seeing where we can potentially improve. We have really positive informal meetings also. So I've met with the chair this week just to talk about a specific ask. We've got really good working relationships, and whilst we've got a specific contract in place, they're also very responsive to Torvine's needs, and they'll take on board any recommendations or supports as we do the information that they provide to us.
Thank you, Claire. Jason, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Okay. We've come to the end of our first section of questionings. Do we have anything to recommend, or do we want to leave it till the end of the meeting? Leave it to the end of the meeting?
Yeah, happy to leave
Okay.
to the end.
Everyone's
I think,
happy?
if I could, Chair, I think a lot of this was really understanding some of the context.
Yes.
So, we're grateful for that, and I think that's probably one of our reflections was that, if it was there, we wouldn't have needed to ask it. So it's just a consideration.
Okay. Right, we go on to our next questions, which is the line of inquiry. First question comes from Councillor Steve Evans.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 4.10. The same processes do not exist for the disabled children's team and the 16 plus and locality teams. So the question is, why are different processes in place? What are the benefits of having separate processes? And there are plans to implement a constant approach?
I think the honest answer is that it wasn't necessarily intentional that we had different processes across the different teams. Members may well be aware that the MASH is a team that was set up more recently. So the MASH was set up in 2019. And as the report says, there are very clear business processes in place to ensure that there is an outcome provided to referrers in the MASH, but those same processes don't exist within the other teams. But that is something that we've included within our areas that we need to consider and improve upon going forward.
Jason?
I think within both those individual teams, Councillor, there is obviously an inherent level of specialism as well that sits within those teams. Hence why I think, you know, when we developed the MASH, why they were almost kept slightly separately from some of those processes. That said, though, again, in terms of our ongoing development and consistency, particularly that consistency of our front door in decision making, it's certainly right that we look to review those arrangements that are in place there.
Okay, Steve, you're happy with that?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It explains it. Yeah.
Okay. Next question comes from Councillor Clarkson. Linda, question 13.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on 4.12 and it's more of a practical question. As has already been outlined, there are no actual Welsh speakers within the MASH team. So the question is, how would that request be facilitated in the now, and indeed for other languages which may be the first language of the service users? So how would that any requests for services within another language be facilitated in the now?
In terms of the MASH, I think I commented earlier that whilst we don't have Welsh-speaking staff within the MASH, we do have Welsh-speaking staff, albeit very small numbers, within Children's Social Services. So we would need to draw upon those individuals, which is less than ideal. Absolutely accept that. In terms of other languages, we have use of services like Language Line and also WITS for the use of interpreters, which we do use.
Okay, Linda?
Yeah, thanks. Very, very succinct answer, answers the query. Thanks.
Sorry, Chair, your mic isn't on.
Okay.
Thanks. I didn't hear you call me in then. So my question relates to 4.13 at the bottom of page 20 in the report. GPs and other relevant health professionals are invited to attend child protection conferences. Do we record figures to show how often GPs attend, and how often do GPs offer a health report? Health services are under a great deal of pressure at the moment, and all our partners are all our partners able to contribute as they should?
So we always invite GPs to conference, but I think it's fair to say that attendance is rare, if ever, from GPs, and I guess given the pressures across the board, to some extent, that's probably unsurprising, albeit would be valuable. Equally, I couldn't say with 100% confidence, but I don't think we get reports from GPs for child protection conferences, and hence it being raised as a recommendation within the rapid review. But we do have health visitors attending and other health professionals who are able to contribute towards the conference, but not GPs.
Okay.
That's disappointing, because they could hold, explicit information that is valuable, and I think that might end up as a recommendation, Bex.
Lucy, did you want to come in, please?
Sorry, if it's okay, can I just ask a supplementary question, again, just to try and understand? When I was reading that Welsh, the wider report, if I remember rightly, it was saying that in terms of health checks, for looked after children, it tended to be much more thorough, and for children who weren't looked after, that wasn't that same level of health check. Is that something you come across, and is there a way of redressing that balance?
So that was referring specifically to for children looked after, there is a statutory requirement for them to have looked after health checks. There is no such requirement for children on the Child Protection Register, so it's reliant on the kind of universal services that are already out there, whereas looked after children have to have those statutory health checks.
Yeah, I can understand that, but does that sort of mean that there could be a bit of an inequality, because even though a child isn't looked after, there might be significant health issues that should be part of the whole process? That was what I was trying to understand.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think hence why it being raised as a recommendation within the rapid review, that perhaps it would be helpful to do that. What I would say is that it's a system that's under significant pressure. Sure. So I'm not sure how that would be managed from a practical perspective if we were to add that as a requirement for children on the Child Protection Register.
Do you want to come in, Claire, on anything, or Jason?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think it's for those children who do come through our child protection process as well. Some of them will go through medicals, of course, depending upon the nature of the original referral or the nature, you know, if they're a child with a significant injury, of course, you know, they go through a medical process and a medical procedure around that. But yeah, I think it's more ad hoc than, you know, that formalised arrangement that's for looked after children.
And can I come in? Would this also include children who've been taken to hospitals and identified as having, you know, having injuries then, which could result in both? And do you also include the educational welfare officers at schools? Okay. Jason. Next question comes from Councillor Linda Clarkson. So,
I think this has largely already been sort of answered.
That's what I just wanted to know. Did you want to add anything to it?
I don't think so. I think the third questioning will pull out the rest.
Okay, thanks. The end of our second section inquiry. Anything that we want to bring up now, or wait till the end of the meeting? Okay. Thank you.
I think, Chair, just to pick up the recommendation that our officers have already picked up regarding GPs.
I think we've all highlighted that. Question now goes from multi-agency arrangements, and I've got the first question. It's relation to 4.18. Multi-agency attendance at strategy discussion meetings has improved considerably since the introduction of the East and West safeguarding hubs. Do we track data on the attendance, and how can concerns on attendance be addressed?
We don't any longer track attendance. We did, so when the East and West safeguarding hubs were initially set up, the local authorities were routinely tracking that to ensure that processes were embedded. I think it's fair to say from discussions, there are regular East and West delivery group meetings that are attended by all agencies, and we're fairly confident that the strategy discussions that are taking place are multi-agency, unless they are absolute urgent strategy discussions. And when I refer to an urgent strategy discussion, it's quite perverse, because obviously all strategy discussions are urgent. I'm talking about an urgent, this needs to take place within the next hour. Obviously, that then becomes more problematic in terms of gathering all the agencies together to be part of that strategy discussion. But where possible, we're confident that they are taking place now on a multi-agency basis, whereas historically it would have very much been social worker and police involved in those initial discussions.
And you just want to come in, Claire?
I think the Regional Safeguarding Board is where we would generally raise concerns around attendance. And I know that recently there's been concerns raised with our partners in police around their capacity, and the fact that sometimes that can result in a delay in strategy discussions or meetings being held. That's been discussed at the Safeguarding Board and is being addressed.
Do you want to come back in? Okay. You satisfied with that answer? No response, so we'll move on to David's question, question 17.
Yeah, I think this has been largely covered, to be honest. I was going to ask if the statement of 419 is that rare that conferences are cancelled in Torfaen due to lack of attendance. You explained in 4.5, about the percentages and things like that. It was really just to ask, do we keep a record of cancellations? And again, I think you've referred to it in the previous question, so I feel that's been covered. Thank you, Chair.
Next question then is from Lucy.
Thank you. This is just a detail that I picked up in reading the All Wales report with regard to training, and particularly the training of police, because it did say that, I think it was across South Wales Police, but I might be wrong, that only about 40% felt they were adequately trained or received appropriate training. Is that mirrored in Torfaen? And are there gaps in the training, do we think, particularly with regard to other agencies, or are we happy that we're on track with the updated training?
I think we've got really good multi-agency training available across the region via the Regional Safeguarding Board. What I think it's fair to say is that there's probably not enough of it to meet demand. That's not a criticism of the Regional Safeguarding Board. Obviously, they're drawing upon practitioners like myself, Claire, and others who already have a full-time job. So most people are doing this in addition to the day job, albeit they will also commission in external providers to provide the training. I think from a multi-agency basis, it's easier for some practitioners to attend full-day multi-agency training than it is for others. So I would say there's a difference between the number of social services practitioners, for example, who attend versus police officers. Police officers do have their own training as well, delivered via the police. But I think where possible, it is helpful to do that on a multi-agency basis. And I think it is more valuable to be able to do that. But we can have those conversations and do have those conversations via the East and West Safeguarding Hub delivery groups in terms of how we can kind of inform some of that training as well.
Claire, do you want to come in?
I think it's important to add also that we're in the process of introducing a new national safeguarding training programme. So all employees of Torfaen, and you'll know yourselves as members, you'll be included in that. There will be a requirement for everybody to engage in safeguarding training, and we're currently working on a new system to ensure that we're complying with that and ensuring that everybody's educated to the right level in order that they can identify, report and respond to any safeguarding issues within the local authority.
Anybody else wants to come in? Linda, can you come in with question 19, please?
Yeah, again, I think some of the context has been already offered to my question within Torfaen, with the explanation of the new officer coming into post and the small bite training being utilised. Would there be potential for that small bite training to be rolled out through multi-agencies? Because, as you say, it's very difficult for people to attend for full-day training and conferences sometimes. So would that have any potential for improving multi-agency training, I wonder?
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion and something that we're more than happy to do. It's only fairly recently, in the last few months, that the bite-sized learning sessions have been set up. We've already extended them to colleagues in education, but the more the merrier from our perspective. They're held online, they're virtual, so numbers isn't an issue, and we're more than happy to extend the offer out to other organisations.
Thank you very much for that answer. Could that be a recommendation, Beck, please?
Certainly, Councillor Patson, thank you.
Recommendation. Do we want to move on to the next section? Okay. Section is key line of inquiry 3, the children's individual needs, and Linda has question 20.
Okay, thank you ever so much, Chair. Looking at 4.22, all paperwork associated with meetings held as part of child protection processes requires the social worker to record the views, wishes and feelings of the child. Can we have more context, please, on how this information is sought, presented and monitored, please?
I think it will obviously depend on the age of the child and how much they're able to kind of engage in that assessment process. But the social workers will use a range of skills to gather that information from the child as part of the child protection inquiries process. As the report says, all the documentation and the initial report for conference, etc., the assessment, it requires the social worker to be specific about the views, wishes and feelings of the child. But again, just to reiterate the conversations that we've had earlier on in today's meeting, the ideal scenario would be that those views are represented at the meeting, either via an advocate or by the child themselves.
Yeah, thank you. I think
anybody else want to come in on that before we move to your next question? Next question.
Yeah, next question is 4.23 regarding the National Youth Advocacy Services. So it's just a little bit more information about how they provide their support services for us.
Claire, do you want to come in?
Yes, of course. So, in respect of child protection conferences, this is processed via an active offer. So, every child that is progressed to conference, there will be an automatic referral sent to NIAS. Their initial point of call then would be parents to obtain consent to contact the child and to speak with the child. Now, our figures would probably reflect the fact that we're working within, again, very tight time frames. And by the time the referral goes out, the NIAS advocate has an opportunity to speak with the parent and then make an appointment to see the child. That can be problematic. We've also identified some additional barriers in that at a point where parents are already very anxious about processes, obtaining consent for children to speak to a stranger, if you like, has become quite difficult. And we've discussed this with NIAS, and they're currently looking at that process to see whether there's a way around that, particularly for those children over the age of 12 who are likely to have their own mobile phones, etc. But we have to be sure that we're doing it in line with good practice and involving parents, ensuring that they're aware that those conversations are being had. But it's something that we're actively working with to try and improve that.
Anybody else want
to Thank you for that answer. I think that answers one of my further questions a little bit further on, and that again could be a recommendation that we have further information about how that's going to be improved, because the issue of consent and the lack of uptake is of concern.
I think it's also important to consider that in a situation where children have generally been approached by strangers, social workers, police, to ask information, when they're then asked, would you like another stranger to speak to you about your wishes and feelings, quite often they feel that that's unnecessary or they don't want that to happen. So we're trying to look at it from a different perspective, and if an advocate doesn't have to be a NIAS advocate, it could be a teacher, a youth worker, an aunt. It's someone who they have trust in. So we're trying to look outside of the box and ensuring that we're not just ticking the NIAS advocacy box, we're looking at supporting that child to be able to share their wishes and feelings as effectively as possible.
This question comes from Councillor Williams, David Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I think again, this is linked to this, and I think we've covered it. I know that you referred to NIAS do offer advocacy to parents as well as children. So it was really just to get some idea of how that's been received. Is there much take-up? I suspect the sort of answer you've given to the last question probably pertains to this as well, that the parents have had a lot of people involved in the process. But But I guess the point is also looking at whether parents can feel that somebody advocating for them may open the door for greater interaction.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think it's, you're right to say that it's a similar response in terms of the take-up, but I think the resource for parent advocacy is also less significant than it is for children. I think it's something that's more recent than child advocacy. Where parents do have advocacy, I think it works really well. I think they really benefit from it, but yeah, the take-up is low.
We're attempting to improve parents' understanding of advocacy because generally someone calls you to say, would you like an advocate? The automatic response in this type of situation is no. So what we're attempting to do is develop more, for both children and adults, more friendly, if you like, leaflets that are sent out with our conference invitation to say to parents, this is the service that's available to you, this is what they're able to offer you, so that they already have an idea about when the phone calls comes, who this person is and what service they're able to offer, in the hope that they'll be more willing to take up that support.
David, have you?
Well, I think that's very helpful, and I think that will form part of a recommendation from us.
Jason, you in today? You're very quiet today. Linda, do you want to come in with question 23, please?
Yeah, I think question 23 is now more or less been covered and will be part of our recommendations.
Okay, Councillor Steve Evans, your question, please.
I think a lot of this has been answered, but probably the part I would ask, with the child protection conferences, is there any underlying reasons why they aren't attending these conferences?
Any reason? Clay?
So following the rapid review recommendations, I've undertaken some research around this. I've spoken to social workers, I've spoken to individuals within our region, so the safeguarding leads within the region as well, to try and get some understanding of how many children actually attend their conferences, to give us a baseline. No one within the Gwent region actually records when children attend. We don't have any figures to say. So I make the assumption that the recommendations made are from the information provided within the minutes of the conferences, that the child wasn't there, or from those conversations. What I have identified within this is that there are lots of benefits for children attending their conferences, and I think one of the most important things is that parents are able to hear it from the child. So parents are able to hear what their lifestyle choices or what their behaviours, the impact that this is having upon the child, getting an understanding of their lived experience. And I would hope that from that, parents may be more motivated to make those necessary changes. We're also able to understand, as I said, the child's lived experience and what this specific risk means to that child, ensuring that we can tailor-make the plans, if you like, to suit that individual child. So I wouldn't say that it's appropriate for them to attend the whole conference, but it's definitely appropriate that we invite them and encourage them to attend with an advocate or via a link to share what their life is like, in order that we can ensure that we're protecting them in the best way possible.
Anyone else want to come in? Are you happy with that, Steve?
Yes, please, Chair. Can I just come in with a query that came up under the corporate parenting panel, actually, where we heard the voice of young people. And do we consider, when we're calling these students out of their school environment, because listening to the voice of young people, they said it can be embarrassing when somebody comes in and calls them out of a class and they have to go to a meeting for this or a meeting for that. So do we consider the times and the requests to young people?
Okay, do you want to answer?
It hasn't come across as a significant issue currently in respect of child protection conferences, but that's because we don't have many children attend. But it's definitely something that we need to consider as we work on improving their attendance. That, you know, there are those opportunities where they're not singled out from their peers, where those questions are asked. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just an idea. Clearly, it's something we need to be acutely aware of, Councillor. I guess your double-hatted role of the Education Scrutiny Committee and this committee, and our desire to increase attendance and support children and people in schools. What I would say is that we would make a clear judgment on whether it was in the best interest of that child at that particular time to be interviewing them within a school setting, and our default position should be that we wouldn't, unless it's like I say, it's in their interest at that particular time.
Okay, Rose.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem. David, do you want to come to the next question?
Yeah, I think again this is on the same theme, and we've been partly answering it because the Safeguarding Board under 426 was saying that plans to develop a leaflet to help children and young people understand the child protection process. But again, would a video or a vlog be a more interactive tool to use so that the child's voice is brought in, and also perhaps to explain the process as well. Children explaining the process to children can perhaps get that message across a little bit more readily. And also, I think you've answered that in terms of not that having children attend conferences is not the only way for their voice to be heard, but it's looking. So we're quite pleased to see how you're considering that, and I think that will form one of our areas of recommendation. So just to flag that.
Right. Question 26. Linda, do you want to come in with your next question, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Regarding 4.27 of the report, where it's noted that whilst assessments consistently consider the role of partners, all household members and parents living outside of the family home, more could be done to consider the role of extended family members also. So it's there's previously been quite strict parameters on extended family member inclusion, but it seems such a vital interaction and input to the process. So I suppose the question is, how will we look at changing this, and what the timescale would be, because it does seem to be a bit of a priority issue.
Yeah, I think we have a family group conference coordinator and support workers who deliver and support families to attend family group conferences. I think it's fair to say that they're largely used in relation to the child looked after process, where we might be considering alternative family members if a child is unable to return to the care of either parent. And I think we're really missing a trick in terms of utilising family group conferences at a much earlier stage. I think we've already talked about some of the challenges and complexities in relation to kind of front-loading that work prior to an initial child protection conference. I think it's probably unlikely that we would be able to arrange a family group conference prior to the initial child protection conference. No. But I think what we probably do need to do is have an expectation that as part of, between the initial child protection conference, the review conference, perhaps that we're putting in an expectation that at least there is a consideration of the need for a family group conference at that stage. And I think it's just widening practitioners' understanding really about the purpose of a family group conference and what the benefits can be. And one of those many benefits is for us as professionals to have a much better understanding of the makeup of that family, who the support systems are, where the risks lie, etc., and how those other family members might be able to support that family moving forward in order to ensure the best outcomes for that child.
Okay, does anyone else want to come in? Claire.
I think this is also important when we look at the very limited resource that we have available currently around sort of statutory services and our partners. And if we can develop sustainable support networks within the family and the community, then that's going to work more effectively for everyone. So
massively so, yeah.
that, again, we come to the end of this section. Our last question comes on this section comes from Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is to do with item 4.32. There is concern about the increasing demands for performance information and the capacity available to provide this. Are they requested additional performance information on top of what we produce and monitor for our internal purposes, or is it supplying data we already track?
I think it's a little bit of both. So sometimes what we have is it's a very similar question, very similar data that they're asking for, but with slightly different parameters. And whilst the information is in the system, I think sometimes there's an assumption that you just need to click a button to get it out of the system, and it's really not that straightforward. So we've got various reports, SQL reports, that are set up within the system to provide us with the data that we need to report to Welsh Government, and also the data that we utilise and monitor via our management meetings on a regular basis. So if the National Safeguarding Board or anybody else asks for data, it's quite often very similar data that they're asking for, but the parameters are slightly different from what we already collate, which obviously creates significant additional pressure on what is already very limited capacity within the performance team to be able to provide that. I think the other thing to add is that some performance metrics work really well on a kind of monthly reporting basis or quarterly reporting basis. Others don't. So there are some reporting requirements that we provide to Welsh Government that are collated and provided on an annual basis, and it makes sense to provide them on an annual basis. One of the examples I can give is our children looked after statutory visits. The variables and the timescales that are required mean that it's very, very difficult to report that sort of data on a quarterly or monthly basis. So I think it's just sometimes understanding some of the nuances with that. Yeah, so they're not asking for wildly different information than what we already have, but it's sometimes the parameters are slightly different.
Lucy, do you want to come in?
Yes, just a supplementary question. Is there, so at a higher level, is there kind of work to be done across these very large, between Welsh Government and all the different agencies, to try and relieve the pressure on that type of requesting? Because that takes up, on a very stretched system, I'd say very inappropriate extra strain. Is there kind of acknowledgement or work to be done to streamline that a bit more?
Absolutely.
Jason, do you want to come in?
On that particular question, there's work we're doing through ADSS, in terms of looking at what that any performance framework or any reporting should look like, because we never. There's always going to be different beasts to feed, is I guess the unfortunate element of it, really, isn't it? One of the other things I was going to add in terms of I think some of the early discussion within that question was around, of course, within the local authority, we've developed Power BI as a reporting tool, a performance tool, and I know that later in the year, as a result of one of the meetings we had with Audit Wales, CIW and Eston I referenced earlier, we're going to be doing, from a leadership point of view, a member seminar looking at how that development of performance within the authority. So I guess a bit of a plug really there. I'm sure it doesn't need a plug, but a bit of a plug for that member seminar that will be forthcoming later in the year.
Thanks, Jason.
Just to say on that point, I think the development and the use of Power BI within children's services has been really invaluable in terms of our kind of understanding of our performance data at the click of a button. I think whereas previously we had the numbers, and then in order to interrogate the numbers, we would have to go back and forth asking questions, who do these figures relate to, etc., etc. Now what we have are dashboards that we can drill through directly to that information. So we have, within children's services, monthly demand management clinics, which are chaired by myself, attended by all the group managers and team managers across the service area, where we're able to really scrutinise that performance data, understand the narrative behind it, and we're able to do that in live time rather than having to say, oh, well, you know, we'll query who that is and come back at next month's meeting. We can do it there and then in the meeting. So I think it's really been invaluable for us.
I come back in, Chair. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, Jason. Yeah. All I want to do before you come back in, Jason, is how accurate is this performance data? You know, it's all like giving data, but we need to try and be as accurate as we possibly could. So how accurate do we get this information?
I think from my perspective, we've got a fantastic, well-established performance team who really, really understand our business. And I think that's I can only compare my experience in other authorities where perhaps you've got the people in performance who've got the data skill set but don't necessarily understand the business. I think our performance team in Children's Services are really knowledgeable, really experienced, they understand the business. I'm confident that the performance information is accurate. It is scrutinised by a performance team on a regular basis. One of the things that I would say is that there's never enough capacity, and the more they're able to cleanse the data, the more accurate it will be, but I am confident that they do that.
Thank you. Jason, come in now, please.
I think Jacqueline must be telepathic. I was just going to give a nod and an acknowledgement to our performance team, and I was going to say that they do a lot more than just pull performance together. I think they're so well equipped and so knowledgeable. The analysis they bring through that performance as well, but also the challenge they can give back when they're data cleansing that performance, and the challenge they can give back to individuals and the teams of, you know, this needs to be up to date is exceptional. And just reiterating exactly what Jacqueline was saying.
That's great to know. Thank you very much. Everyone happy with the response from that? Okay. We will obviously make a recommendation now. We'll leave it till the end of the meeting again on this one. So do you want to leave it till the end? Okay. Inquiry find key lines of inquiry decision making. That's our question 28, and that's from myself. There's a need to ensure that practitioners across all agencies are aware of protocol and when to use it. How will this be achieved and how is it monitored?
Sorry, Chair, can you just confirm what protocol you're referring to?
Well, the report and how we are achieving everything we want, the standards that we expect from different agencies.
Okay. So within the Regional Safeguarding Board, we have, as I've mentioned previously, a number of subgroups that sit under the Safeguarding Board. So one of those is the Protocols and Procedures subgroup, which I used to be the chair of, and they will develop a range of protocols that are multi-agency, and there are a number of protocols already in place in relation to child protection section 47 inquiries, child protection conferences, the expectations in terms of attendance at conference, what information should be included within reports for child protection conference. The other thing that the Safeguarding Board do via child practice review processes, so any child practice review within the region, any recommendations from those will then be picked up within the subgroups of the board, translated into 7-minute briefings that are widely circulated across all the organisations, and also discussed at the local practitioners safeguarding network events that are held on a regular basis and really well attended.
Okay, thanks. Claire, do you want to add anything? Jason? Sure. Thank you. Rose, do you want to come in with question 29, please?
Yeah, it's a quick general one. How are people informed when they're removed from the register?
So the review child protection conferences are multi-agency, so any practitioners who are actually working with the child should be in attendance at that review conference, so would be part of the decision making to remove a child from the register.
And how are they informed? How is the parents, the child, and the other partners informed?
The parents,
if they're not in attendance at that conference, how would they know?
They would receive the minutes of that meeting.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rose. Questions comes from Councillor Lucy Williams. Lucy?
Thank you very much. So this is going on to that key line of inquiry about establishing whether or not a child is at risk. Again, referring back to the All Wales report, it seemed that there was inconsistency of understanding about what the term significant harm meant. Are you finding that's an issue in Torfaen as well, or are you sort of, is there a clear understanding here in Torfaen?
I think within children's services there's a clear understanding of significant harm, and one of the things that we did a few years ago now was to update our Child Protection 47 inquiries document to include some of Bruce Thornton's risk assessment work, which clearly kind of leads the practitioner within the document in terms of really drilling down into understanding what significant harm is and means to ensure that they are focusing on significant harm rather than simply harm. I think it's fair to say that the understanding of significant harm outside of children's services will be different. But that's why we have documents like the threshold guidance document for other practitioners and the multi-agency training to assist others in understanding that definition of significant harm. But I think there will always be differences of opinion in terms of that threshold.
Yeah. Jason, do you want to come in?
Thank you.
I think, as Jacqueline mentioned earlier on in the session, there's that work being done regionally as well, looking at the threshold, a threshold of need document, which I think is being significant elements of the Torfaen document are being used through that discussion as well. So hopefully they'll build on that consistency across agencies. There's always going to be a difference, isn't there? There's always going to be a professional difference and different levels of professional judgment. I think that's what makes that multi-agency decision-making process strong. So, you know, but there is, you know, hopefully we will adopt a greater level of consistency within that as well.
Thank you. Come in.
Just to mention on that point as well, I can't recall whether I put it in the report, but there is a document through the Regional Safeguarding Board in terms of resolving practitioner differences and sets out a very clear protocol. So if a referral, for example, comes from a school, they put in the referral and they're not satisfied with the response that they've received in relation to that, they are encouraged to challenge that decision-making via the Resolving Practitioner Differences protocol.
Okay, you happy with that? Yeah. Steve, could you take Catherine's question 31, please?
Yeah, no problem. The same sort of paragraph. What happens after the age of 16 to 18, though classed as young adults, some are not capable? Are they supported and looked after if needed? And then they are not just taken off the register? And how are the group monitored?
So children are children up to the age of 18. So we do have children over the age of 16 on the Child Protection Register. Obviously, some of the issues will be different and perhaps more related to contextual safeguarding than perhaps issues within the family home. But we do support children on the Child Protection Register over the age of 16.
Anyone else want to carry on? Clay.
In respect of 18-year-olds, I appreciate where the question's coming from, in that at 18 years of age, the risk doesn't disappear at that point. And I think that is something that all local authorities struggle with, because the transition between children's services and adult services can be quite complex, and what we would class to be significant risk of harm may not fall into the same categories in adult services. But it's definitely something that we're looking at, and we're developing more effective transition processes to ensure that our most vulnerable children transitioning into adulthood are having effective and appropriate support.
Just to add, I think we've got some exceptional examples of where we have seen that transition of children moving into adulthood and services fallen, albeit within a different, I guess, regulatory framework or different legislation. but those services have followed them, and from an overall social care point of view, overall systems point of view, we're not in the business of just dropping risk. When there's an age, if the risk continues, there's a service that's going to be provided.
Okay, anyone want to come in? Are satisfied? Okay. Concluding questions now, you'd be pleased to know. And question 32 comes from Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is going back to section 3 of the report and Welsh Government recommendations, health recommendations and education recommendations regarding a centralised accessible IT system that seems crucial in capturing all health information or other information held on children in a way that can be accessible. So have we got any more information about this? It's a should at the moment. Is there sort of any time scale on this? How will this impact on us as a local authority? Will there be any implications resource-wise?
I think it's fair to say that this is a recommendation that comes out of most child practice reviews. That wouldn't it be wonderful if we all used the same system, we all spoke the same language? I don't want to be pessimistic about it, but I can't see that happening anytime soon.
Ethan, do you want to come in?
Exactly that, really. I think, the amount of times we'll have seen this as a key recommendation, and historically there's been so much work that has gone into trying to join systems up and try and join databases up. WICUS, when WICUS came to us, it was almost on the basis that we would be joining up with our health colleagues. That's moved on considerably. And what I would say is internally we are looking at, for example, within our children's framework, how we join up our social care systems with our education systems better. And even if we can't get the systems to talk, it's how we ensure that we've got the skills across both of those service areas that we know that a representative within the education service can look in the WICA system if that's what currently exists in the future, and vice versa, that colleagues within social care can overlap and look in. Yeah, I think it's a real national issue, and there are discussions being taken place at the moment because we're looking at different arrangements, or potentially different arrangements from WICUS going forward as well. So it's an opportune time, but it's a challenging time to be able to do that as well. Again, I'm quite pessimistic in that sense.
Dave, do you want to add anything? Okay. Move on to
so possibly a bit of lobbying to be done.
We may have a begging bowl. Questions 3 comes from Rose.
Thank you, Chair. And my question relates to my previous question on 6.2 in the report of risks. Ensuring there is a robust and consistent approach to adding and removing children's names from the Child Protection Register is vital to keep children safe. How confident are we that we have the robust and consistent approach?
I think, going back to what I said earlier, Councillor Seaborn, I'm confident that we have a robust and consistent approach. That said, there are things that we could do to improve it, and there will always be things that we can do to improve it, and what we need to ensure is that we continue to be alive to issues that are going on around us on a local level, a regional level, a national level, ensure that we're bringing research into practice, ensuring that we're aware of, reading, taking into account recommendations from national reviews, child practice reviews, to ensure that we continue to keep that robust and consistent approach that we've got.
Anyone else want to come in, Claire?
I have the benefit of coming from a different local authority. So I've worked within Blaenau Gwent and Monmouthshire prior to coming to Torfaen. And when coming to Torfaen, I was shocked at the level of management oversight of child protection processes. So in Torfaen, we're the only local authority that I've worked in that has team managers chairing all call groups. So that's the meetings that are held every 4 weeks. That ensures a really high level of management oversight. And my initial view was, is this not a waste of management time? But on further you know, when I've explored it further, is actually really effective in ensuring that our child protection plans are effective, that they're progressive, and that we're ensuring that they're moving. And I think that we've definitely got it right here, even though it's absorbing more management capacity, it's definitely effective in ensuring that we're protecting those vulnerable children.
That's really good to know. Jason, do you want to add anything? Oh. Lucy, question 34.
Yeah. I think I'm going to narrow this question down a little bit. It's not really a question. It's very clear that staffing is a big issue and retention and recruitment. So I think narrowing it down, because we could talk about that forever, I guess, would it be useful to have a little bit of an understanding of what proportion of agency staff are used? Is that, you know, how does that compare with others, and is that a particular issue in Torvine?
So we've got 8 agency social workers at the moment. Some of those are covering vacancies and some of those are covering maternity leave. I think it's fair to say that compared to a number of other local authorities, our use of agency workers is very low. I know that there are some local authorities in Wales that have a very high proportion of agency staff. Members may also be aware of the All Wales Pledge that all directors have signed up to in relation to use of agency staff within children's services. So that caps the pay that can be paid to agency social workers with a view to trying to attract those agency social workers back into permanent posts effectively. What it also does is places a requirement on us to ensure that where we are used in agency, that those agency social workers have more than 3 years post-qualifying social work experience, because one of the things that we're seeing at the moment is newly qualified social workers going straight into agency work and they don't have the experience. And I think the kind of early news from that pledge is that it's actually working quite positively in reducing the use of agency social workers on a national basis, and we have regular national meetings to discuss the impact of the pledge.
Thank you.
Jason.
Just to, even though we've got that cohort of agency staff, as a local authority, I think we've always been really good at retaining our staff within social care. There are staff that inevitably are going to move on as a result of opportunities that exist in that, you know, in other local authorities, neighbouring local authorities. If a promotion opportunity comes up there that isn't at that point available within Torvine, some staff will move on. And, you know, there is that acknowledgement that some staff will move on because of the pressures as well. And, you know, I think the 3 of us have been practising social workers and are acutely aware of those pressures that our staff, you know, are under day to day, you know, day in, day out, and you know, do our utmost to be able to provide the support through that entire system we've got within the structure we've got within social care for those staff to enable that retainment.
Okay, happy? Do you want to come in?
So we also, Jacqueline also monitors capacity within teams regularly. So we have a sort of, whilst it's very difficult to work from numbers because different cases will be different levels of complexity and take more capacity, then we work to a standard process. We expect social workers and assistant team managers to be working within a capacity. So what do we say, 20 for social workers, and then between 12 and 15 for assistant team managers, taking into account their other responsibilities. And Jacqueline's just recently done a little bit of research to look at whether we have got appropriate staffing levels to meet the needs of the service, and it appears that our current staffing structure is appropriate. We are able to meet that level. I think in respect of recruitment, recruitment and retention, this is something that our new service development manager is also working on. So we've recognised that a lot of the social workers that we've recruited recently are newly qualified social workers. So we're working very closely with universities to sort of increase our profile there, to try and ensure that we are appealing and we're putting our name out there. But we've also worked within the local authority to increase the number of practice educators that we have. It's because what we're finding is once we've got students in and they're working their placements within Torfaen, they generally stay, they apply for our vacancies. So if we can increase the number of practice educators we have more opportunities to fill those vacancies with newly qualified staff. We've also developed, or Georgina, the Service Development Manager, is also developing a support system for these newly qualified members of staff, ensuring that they have appropriate mentoring, access to training, and the support that they need in order that we can hold them within the service and grow them as Torfaen social workers. So it's all a job in progress, if you like, but we're definitely seeing some benefits of that.
Answered my question. Councillor Seaborn wants to come in.
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered, many years ago when I was in a different job, we introduced a bursary for social workers, which paid for their training and with a retainer of that they would remain in our local authority for 3 years. Do we still run this bursary?
Yes, we do. Councillor Seaborn.
Okay. Anyone else wants to come in on that? Linda, do you want to come in on question 35, please?
I think, Chair, that quite a bit of this has been covered and will hopefully be one of our recommendations.
Anything to add before we go to the last question?
No, I think it's around the review and the family group, so I think we have talked about that.
The last question, and it's regarding paragraph 7.1. Action to be taken following scrutiny. Will an action plan be developed to encompass each of the actions to include timelines, dedicated officers, so that implementation and monitoring can be tracked?
Yes, certainly, and happy to share that with members.
You'll be pleased to know that's the end of our question, unless Jason or anyone wants to come in. Before we make our recommendations and summary, do either of you or any of you want to come in and make a summary of today's report and anything? Jason?
Not particularly a summary of today's report, but I think just that opportunity, just the opportunity. I think, you know, in terms of safeguarding child protection, the whole system, you know, it's a very, very fragile system. Coming back to perhaps some of the latter points that we raised around staff retention, staff, and in just that acknowledgement, you know, the exceptional work that our staff do within children's services. You know, it really is at the cutting edge, I think, sometimes well, it really is at the cutting edge of risk management, and I think, you know, just the pressures that staff feel, that acknowledgement, the hard work and effort they put in as well.
Absolutely.
I think, just picking up what Jason said there, and the impact upon our social work staff of child protection and working within this environment, we are ensuring that we have very robust supervision processes in place. And we've also offered clinical supervision outside of the local authority by an independent provider for those social workers who feel that additional support is necessary.
Just like to thank you all on behalf of the committee for answering our questions. We do understand as a committee and as a council the difficulties and the pressure you all have, and we are grateful for what you were doing and the responses, which gives us a better insight this morning on the report and everything you do, and we're very, very grateful for you giving up your time. And of course, we're here to support you and offer support at any time. Okay?
Thank you.
So if you want to go and have your cup of coffee now, you're more than welcome. Members, please remember the meeting is still in formal proceedings and still being webcast. So whilst the officers are leaving, we'll take time to have a think about our recommendations for scrutiny. Thank you all. Thank you. Thanks, Jason, Claire, Jacqueline. I'm now handing you over to Rebecca now, who's going to formulate the recommendations with us as members. I do think that that was an excellent meeting. I think that the officers really answered our questions admirably and gave us a lot more information than I even thought was going to be possible from them. I thought Jacqueline was very, very good. I was very impressed. Okay? So, David.
Yeah, just to say, I think that, you know, again, even though we had a lot of questions, they were all answered and covered within quite a lot of time. I didn't feel there was any rambling around. It was quite to the point. So I think that should be noted and commended as well.
Sorry. Okay, are we ready to make some recommendations? So if I'll go to Rebecca now, and we'll
Thank you, Chair. So if I can remind members of the scrutiny activity being asked of you today. So the Healthier Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee is invited to review the information contained within the report and determine whether it is satisfied that the Council is fulfilling its obligations to safeguard children at risk, to assess whether the actions proposed to address the areas for further improvement are adequate and robust, and to make recommendations to the Executive Member for Children, Families and Education based on your comments. So can I suggest, members, perhaps if we take it through each key line of inquiry, and you can break down your recommendations on that. So, Jay, if members want to start with key line of inquiry one.
Key line of inquiry, I think that I'm satisfied this morning. I don't know where you are, that we are robustly doing the job to ensure our safety. Obviously, as I said, there's always ongoing improvements that can be made because situations change and are rapid. But I think overall, I'm quite satisfied. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Want to come in? Lucy?
I think I would just endorse that by saying that although on initial reading of the report we had a lot of questions, in fact the context that was put in that and the questions, and in fact looking at page 24, looking at the recommendations, they actually definitely picked up on some other areas of concern. So I'm very satisfied that the process and the answers given, you know, I think showed that I'd be very happy to endorse that we are satisfied that we've got a robust system in place.
Okay. Linda, you've got your hands up. Do you want to come in? And then Rose.
Yeah, I think the key line of inquiry, the MASH more than just word strategy, the offer of Welsh language and advocacy came under that, didn't it? So, Rebecca, I'm sure you've captured those as recommendations.
Yes, Councillor.
From the conversations that we've
had.
had.
That one. There was also reviewing the practices around the consistency between the disabled teams and the children's services team. There was that recommendation. And also, Councillor Seaborn, you wanted to put one forward on the GPs?
Yes, Expression 14, yes.
So, sorry, can I ask you to expand on that? Because my notes, I didn't quite capture the whole of that.
Yeah, it was the answer to the question was that they send out the response in the minutes to those that have attended conferences, but I think all GPs should be, I think under the report, all GPs and health visitors should be informed.
Yeah, even if they're not attending, they've got the information then if they see the child, haven't they?
There's also something around attendance of GPs as well, wasn't there? Because it's very lackadaisical and actually having that information. GP information can be really pertinent to a child protection review. And I think, you know, that's something for the health board recommendation, I think. But I don't know whether... I've also got an issue over the advocacy bit for young children and the recording of child attendances at conference. I think you picked up on that, Linda. But to look also, that came out of the corporate parenting panel, that look at the timings of when these conferences are, when these young people are being asked to attend, because it could be exam time, it could be pertinent lesson time. So, and maybe think about the suggestion, I think Dave Williams said about having a video, just playing the video of the child's feelings might be a substitute for the child in attendance.
Yeah, I think I picked that specific recommendation, Councillor Seaborn, up under key line of inquiry 3.
Oh yeah, sorry,
Okay.
I
No,
just,
it's okay.
I just blurred mine out that I'd written down.
David, do you want to give it?
Yeah, thanks. I think on key line of inquiry 1, I think it is actually that we noted the health recommendation of the CIW report about GP practices providing a written report for child protection conferences, and we would support all efforts to ensure that that GP input is made into conferences. So we're looking to support our departmental colleagues to take that forward.
Yeah.
Something on those lines. Second point, I think in terms of the summarising, we noted the look to move towards having a consistent process, and it would be helpful to confirm that it does include disabled children's service 16 plus, etc., and a timeline for it.
Yeah.
Is that okay, just to make that a bit more?
Got a question, but it's the next line of inquiry. It's the involvement with parents and grandparents, a greater family.
Yeah, massively so. And some timelines on when that's going to be implemented.
Yeah, okay.
The point about sorry, I might be out of sync with where we are, but the point about an advocate, lots of young people wouldn't know what an advocate was, so whether or not they could think about their choice of language with like a trusted person, whether it's an auntie or another officer or a teacher,
Person
they could think of
a person they felt confident about working with.
Yeah, a trusted person rather than an advocate.
David.
Yeah, I'm just trying, if I may, colleagues, to try and bring us through the lines of inquiry in order. So I think we're on line of inquiry 2. And I think we've picked up something about multi-agency training events. I recommend that multi-agency training is taken forward. And your point, Linda, which was actually about the kind of bespoke modular, what do they call it? Yeah, bite-sized training.
Bite-sized,
yeah.
We would recommend
and spreading that out to other organisations which are involved in the safeguarding and CPR process. Seems like the perfect solution to dealing with the fact that it's difficult for people to attend for full day and half day training. And whether that, if that's online and it is set up in some sort of modular way, David, that is a little bit more than voluntary, maybe, if possible.
Yeah, okay. Linda, thank you. Steve, do you have any input on key line?
Yeah, the one I got was more on the particular aspect on the IT issue to utilise with other working parties. But that's the other thing is the performance data. You know, perhaps it's something that we need to see. We don't need names or anything like that, but just see the statistics of it working or the work in progress.
So it's just
because there was none of that really in there.
Just to come back in on that point, Councillor Evans, obviously Jacqueline did mention that there will be a members' seminar specifically on Power BI and that performance information, so I'm sure members will be given a lot more detail at that point.
Right, is anybody got any more questions on the first bit on inquiry line 2? Anybody else?
Yes, please, Chair. There was some comment about the difference in regional thresholds and whether or not we could recommend that there was a consistency.
Just to come back in on that one, I think that they're obviously developing that regional threshold at the moment, so that they're looking for a decision in March now. So there will be a more consistent approach on that. So whether I just note that in the comments, Councillor Seaborn, that you'd like to receive confirmation and detail on that once that is implemented. Yeah.
Thank
you.
Linda,
do you have anything on before we move on to key line of inquiry 3, please?
I think the training issue, Beck, that's been picked up already, isn't it?
Yeah, David's brought that up. So can we move on now to recommendations under key line of inquiry 3, please? The advocacy, we've noted that. Want anything consistent on that? We've got the recommendation about attendance at meetings. Oh, David.
Sorry, Chair. I think the recommendation was about sort of we support there being a recording of children attending conferences because there was that information was not available. I think Jacqueline stated, and they checked with other authorities. So I think they recognise its importance. And I think we also made a recommendation, which was the bit about having video or vlog, both to explain the process, and ideally peer-to-peer, but also as a means of the child's voice coming into the meeting for at least a part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we picked up the issue of household members, extended family attending, and there being some sort of setup of family conferences after the initial conference.
Yeah, we've already picked that up, Linda, but I think Bex wants to come in a minute.
Just to tie in quickly with Councillor Williams' point there, also you raised the discussion about parental advocacy.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you wanted to include in that sort of recommendation about improving parents' help, you know, looking at ways to improve parents' understanding of the role of advocacy as well.
Yeah, that's quite vital because they need consent.
David, do you want to come
Yeah,
back in,
I think that one might be specific in terms of exploring how information is provided to parents to explain the benefits of parental advocacy and perhaps consideration, if they have some good practice examples, to use that to support that message.
Right. Anything under key line of inquiry 4? Key line of inquiry 5?
Rose, were you happy about how people were informed when they were deregistered?
I don't think so. I think receiving minutes isn't a way of informing people. That means they have to read the minutes to understand that they've been removed. I think there is an issue there that, you know, that either an email or a phone call or somebody says, actually, at the child conference this morning, that child was removed from.
David,
you know.
Agreed. I think exactly that, Rose. I think the review conference should confirm a professional who will convey the message directly to the family that child has been removed from the register. Responsibility needs to be made clear and action direct. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
I also say it needs to be simplified because some of the parents you're approaching may not have the educational, standard to read some of these reports or understand some of the big words that people say. So it needs to be simplified.
Yeah. My other point is that there might be people that weren't involved in the conference, such as foster carers, and whether they're informed that the child that's now in their care is removed from the at-risk register.
That could also involve the pupils in school with the educational welfare officers as well.
Yeah. So it's those that are not in the conference also that need to know on a need-to-know basis.
Before I bring Linda back in, I'm bringing David in, please.
I think I would suggest that probably the notes of the conference sent to the relevant professionals should give the information. I think the key point we wanted to make was a clear and simple response to the family about the position, which I think we've done. If I may very quickly, without wanting to move us back, I think at the line of inquiry about performance information, it's just perhaps to sort of say that we welcome the opportunity for a member seminar on Power BI. That was the suggestion made there, and I think that would pick that up. It's not a
Yeah.
recommendation, but it's something that we'd like to take from this committee.
Right, we're moving on to key line of inquiry 5. Anything to come from that from anyone? We just
did that.
querying 5. I've got a question. I'm not if it's a recommendation regarding the assurance that 16 to 18-year-olds looked after under the same situation, although they are adults, the transition period is really taken into account because of their age 18, the situation not necessarily goes away. So just consistency in support for 16 to 18, those on transition. Okay?
Just to add, Chair, because I agree with you completely, I think if perhaps we can say if they have examples of good transition support, it would be helpful to make that available as an assurance. Yeah.
A case study, yeah. Right, that's no problem. Concluding questions? Anything coming from anyone on those, please?
Beck, have you captured the question on the IT system? Is there anything we can do regarding supporting to lobby Welsh Government towards seriously looking at this?
Yeah, David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think what we recognise that was a recommendation made to all agencies. We see that it's the responsibility of Welsh Government to coordinate. Our primary concern would be that this does not put additional burden onto local authority finances or staff resources. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine,
Bearing in
David.
mind the budget that we've got at the moment.
And we've captured the one on the family group conferences and extended family.
Right. Steve, do you have anything to come in on, please? And then Rose?
No, people have covered what I was going to.
You
so,
sure?
Yeah.
Rose, do you want to come in?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right. Lucy, do you have anything?
Just a suggestion that all the points that have been made in 7.1, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, these 9 points, that actually we review those in about a year's time to see what progress has been made under each of those 8 points.
Yeah. Agreed. Put those in an action plan and provide those to the members. So, yeah, we can put them forward as vision and then.
And you asked about an action plan, Chair. Yeah.
Before we finalise everything, is everyone satisfied with the recommendations? Does anyone want anything else to bring to the table? Apart from noting that we thank the officers, we understand the pressure they're under and the difficulties that we are facing with staff recruitment, but we are very pleased with the hard work that they are doing and we support the social services team extensively. Okay.
I was very impressed by the comments from officers who've worked in other local authorities about their appreciation of how robust Torfaen's systems and processes are.
I think that would be a recommendation to note that we notice that the officers have realised how extensively robust our systems are and that we are really grateful for that. But David wants to come in as well.
Could I also say that we recognise the efforts that have been taken to reduce dependency on agency staff and have consistent staffing, which we fully endorse.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam. So I'll
David.
add those to the commentary section,
okay?
If that's okay, rather than speaking recommendations.
Can I say I thought, we looked at the report initially and thought there was a lack. They'd done the scrutiny for us, and they had actually done their own scrutiny. So I thought the professionalism and the responses that we received today from officers were excellent.
The context given was absolutely second to none, wasn't it?
Totally agree with that, Rose. Totally.
I think we all came in it thinking there wasn't enough meat on the bone, but from the questions in and the responses from officers, I thought we gained an awful lot out of it. So I think that was a really good scrutiny meeting. I'm grateful for all the questions raised by all the members. Okay? You happy now? Sorry, turning over my sheets. Item 6, consideration for items for our next meeting. So can you tell us what we've got on our visioning panel, please?
Thank you, Chair. So as you will see from the report, this is setting out the discussion on which item you would want to see scrutinised at your next meeting. Yeah. So laid out within the appendices to the report are the visioning basket of items that you've selected, the exec forward plan items. So you'll see on there you have the award of contract for the provision of Greenhill Bungalow. So that is not an item necessarily that would come before scrutiny. The community wellbeing strategy, which you've already scrutinised twice, that's going to council in April. Yeah. And there have been no specific audit referrals within the remit of this committee. So as it stands, the item that you selected at visioning was the placement availability and sufficiency report. So just to remind members, should you agree to taking that, scrutiny would be asked to consider how the service area is managing deficits in placement sufficiency and how it is developing alternative provision for children looked after. So are members satisfied that that's the item that you still wish to scrutinise?
Yes. Is everyone happy with that we proceed with that next item?
Yeah. Happy.
Okay. Happy?
Yep.
Yep, that's fine.
I just think it fits very logically on what we've just done.
Yeah, it does.
It's nicely formed on, as it follows on. Okay, well, the date of the next meeting will be Thursday, the 18th of April, which is after Easter. All I need to do is thank you for your attendance this morning, contributions and questions, and now if everyone's happy, we'll close the meeting.
Thank you.